Okay, part 2. Okay. At Karstis Estate. Lazletta had today off. As it stood, Grisha was the only one of my attendants set to accompany me to the sovereignty, so Audley was training her as part of the handover. I watched them out of the corner of my eye while moving to my hidden room, but before I could make it... Lady Rosamund, good morning. Here's my name. Hartmut, you really did make the preparations in a single night. Dang good! Hartmut had presented me with his namestone, wearing a smile that was equal parts heart-throbbingly handsome and heart-chillingly creepy. Creepy, yes! Audley was supposed to be overseeing the name-swearing ritual, but she screwed up her nose and turned away. Audley! Don't neglect your duties. At least you're not the one he's staring at. No. The name-swearing itself ended up being even worse, despite the fact that everyone else grimaced with pain when giving their names. Hartmut pretty much gasped. So this is Lady Rosamund's mana, and made a face of complete and utter... No! This dude! I swear, if they had taken it in a different direction and made him a love interest for her, or him obsessing over her in a romantic way, this would have been not out of place in this context, essentially. Oh, dear Lord. A complete and utter bliss as it gradually bound him. It was so terrifying that I practically threw the rest of my mana at him, my eyes brimming with tears as I tried to complete the ritual as quickly as I could. That was supposed to hurt, but hurt wore a dream from start to finish. I'm not sure I could be any more freaked out. He's the biggest weirdo of all. Clarissa doesn't have the necessary materials on hand, so she will need to perform hers later, Hartmut informed me. I cannot even begin to describe the regret I saw in her eyes. I see. Clarissa might have been disappointed, but I considered it a lucky break. Performing that ceremony twice in one day was as good as asking to be bedridden from exhaustion. I'm going to my hidden room to write, I said. Understood, Hartmut replied. May I have your permission to leave for a bit and gather some intelligence? Do as you please. I got away from Hartmut, and his eerily delighted smile at the earliest opportunity, and went straight into my hidden room, whereupon I used my invisible ink to write a letter to Ferdinand. I told him that as payment for my hard work translating in the Underground Archive, I managed to secure him a hidden room and immunity from Detlande's crimes. Sylvester and the royal family would confirm whether his living conditions had actually improved during the summer funeral. I also detailed our discoveries about the silver cloth that the previous Keith Groschel had used, and mentioned that the Ehrenfest Knights were now carrying normal weapons to use alongside their staffs. There was also the phrase that Hortensia had said to Detlande, which I still didn't understand. All in all, I think this is a pretty informative letter. I didn't write anything about my new adoption or being a exempt candidate, but I managed to include everything else that feels important. Why are you excluding the most important things? Write that in invisible ink. He needs to know this. He needs to know that you're going to the sovereignty at the very least. Dear Lord. Indeed, it was perfectly in line with our rule of not leaking information to other duchies. I nodded several times in satisfaction. This would do. Oh, God. For the visible section of my letter, I made sure to focus on things that nobody would think twice about. I offered my condolences on Ob Ahrensbach's passing, expressed my usual concern about Ferdinand's health, noted that Sylvester would deliver the requested luggage during the summer funeral, and said that I would include sweets for Letizia, among other things. All that remained was to wait for the ink to dry. I exited my hidden room, leaving my letter to Ferdinand inside to find Cornelius waiting outside for me. Lady Rosamund, I'm here with a message from Mother, he said. She wishes to discuss the handover with you at your earliest convenience, and she proposed that you have dinner with her tomorrow. Will that suit your schedule? She has also proposed that you stay the night. I asked Audley to get everything ready for the meal and my sleepover. Tomorrow was going to be my first trip home in quite some time. In the meantime, I wrote a bunch of more letters to a bunch of places. I wrote to Bridget and Ilgner asking her workshops to prepare as much Fey paper as they could, then bring it to the castle as soon as possible. I wrote to my library attendant Losfum, informing him of the letter we had received from Ferdinand during the Archduke conference. I also explained that henceforth he would need to liaise with Sylvester about any luggage being moved to Ahrensbach, including that due to be transported during the summer funeral. Naturally, I also made sure to note my success in negotiating for Ferdinand to receive better living conditions and a guarantee that he wouldn't be punished for Detlande's actions. Last of all, I wrote to the temple, notifying them that I would return before the coming-of-age ceremonies and that a report covering this year's Archduke conference will need to be done via letter. since the merchants were already so busy. There wasn't much for us to discuss. In any case, we weren't offering any more merchant slots than last year, and everyone's priority right now was preparing Grosshall to be renovated. Don't need to tell at least Benno that I'm going to the Sovereignty. Lutz is in Kernberger right now, so... Oh, shoot! How will they... They're gonna have to tell Lutz that! He's not gonna want to find out by coming back and her not being there? Oh, no. Oh, no, what about Hugo and Ella? Are they gonna stay behind? She's pregnant right now. By the time she has the baby, it'll probably be it'll be close to the time for Rosemine to leave. Oh, boy. This was a matter of the utmost importance, so I would invite Benno to my orphanage director's chambers in secret and explain the circumstances to him in my hidden room. Yeah, you're not engaged anymore, so you can do that. With so many more named sworn retainers among my entourage, I could even swear them to secrecy and allow them to join. Welcome home, Lady Rosemine, said the attendants of the Karstad estate. I arrived with Cornelius, Lenore, Laisletta, and Angelica. Laisletta was supposed to be on vacation, but she received a direct invitation from Elvira. In short, my mother knew that trying to have a frank conversation with Angelica was pointless. And since the finer details of our situation were still confidential, consulting her parents was out of the question. That was why she had turned to Laisletta, who was both the successor to her house and one of the few people privy to my circumstances. Angelica is technically still invited, but I'm sure her mother doesn't actually care whether she's here or not. She just needs Laisletta. Bonifacius was at the dinner table as well. Our attendants were busy moving around to serve us as we stuck to more mundane topics of conversation, such as the printing industry and its future. After the meal, our attendants prepared some wine and tea before taking their leave. Once they were gone, Karstad activated an area-affecting magic tool and got straight to the point. I told Elvira everything, with the Owl's permission, of course. There won't be a need for any further explanation, and I believe Angelica is our first topic of conversation. That's right, I said. It was decided that she would marry either Traga or grandfather so that her cancelled engagement to Eckert wouldn't damage her reputation, correct? In response, Bonifacius muttered, I continue to hope that Traga matures quickly so that he can marry her in my stead. He obviously wasn't very enthusiastic about wedding someone who was both in service to and more or less the same age as his granddaughter. If you want Traga to surpass you, why did you perform the ritual to obtain more divine protections? However, I continued, Angelica now wishes to move to the Sovereignty. Mother, father, with her agreed-upon engagement in mind, I thought it best that we ask you how we should proceed and whether it will be acceptable for me to keep her as my guard knight. Elvira praised me for not having made the decision on my own and turned to Laisletta. How does your house feel about this, she asked. Both the engagement to Lord Eckert and your promised compensation for its nullification were far beyond what a men-noble house would ever deserve. Thus, as long as the good relationship between our families remains, we have no particular desires when it comes to my sister's marriage. Being the retainer of a princess is enough of an honor, and she's already looking forward to training with the Sovereign Knight's Order. If possible, we would ask that her wish to move be granted. Laisletta then turned to Angelica, who merely smiled and nodded. Elvira knew not to expect Angelica to behave like a regular noblewoman, so she approved the request without further ado. If moving to the Sovereignty as a guard knight is what Angelica wishes to do, she has our permission. Recompense can be discussed with your parents at a later date. Now, Cornelius, what do you and Lenore plan to do? With a loud clunk, Bonifacius set his wine-filled glass down on the table. Go to the Sovereignty, he roared. Protect Rosemine. Mother was asking them, not you, I noted. It was painfully obvious that he'd drunk too much. Bonifacius' eyes shot wide open. I would go with you, Rosemine. I would. But Archducal family members can't become guard knights or move to the Sovereignty. Who made these laws? I don't know! It's either in the Book of Law or this is an Archduke thing, an Ehrenfest. I don't know. No. It's in the Book of Law, I think, because they can't legally take Rosemine as an Archduke candidate. That would be, shoot. Go away. That would be Zenskit, who ruled the country long ago. We covered that in law class. Curse you, Gazetskit. You ruined everything. Karstad sighed. It would reassure us all to know that you had Cornelius in the Sovereignty with you, but thinking about our knight's order would compensate for his absence gives me a bit of a headache. Now that Ferdinand and Eckert were gone, Cornelius played quite a key role in hunting the Lord of Winter. Losing him too would have serious consequences. In that case, I ventured, perhaps Ian Lenore should stay, then... No, Rosemine, Bonifacius interrupted, shaking his head. That won't be a concern. Ever since you revived that ancient Dunkelfelger ritual, we've been beginning our fights by seeking the divine protections of several gods at once. You've also given us your compression method, which is allowing the knights to slowly obtain more mana, demonstrated the value of prayer at the Royal Academy, and given us the way to repeat the Divine Protections ritual during the Archduke Conference. Those who work harder will still be able to grow stronger, and the knights who come of age henceforth will only continue to increase in quality. Not to mention, with the ingredients we got from our gathering spot during the conference, it's going to be even easier for us to make magic tools and rejuvenation potions. Ehrenfest's current lack of strength is no reason to reduce the quality of your own guards. If working hard is all that is required, then that's what we'll do. Indeed, Elvira said, Lord Bonifacius is entirely correct. It would also be pitiable beyond words to have a new princess arrive at the sovereignty without any archnobles among her knights. Those of the Royal Academy know that her elder brother has been filling that role thus far, so I would ask that he stay by her side. But Elvira, Karstead began, as the personal guard of the Archduke himself, he had a better understanding of the Duchy's knights than anyone. But he was still shut down without a moment's hesitation. How could Cornelius choose not to accompany Rosamund now, when she needs him more, Elvira asked. He chose to serve her, and what kind of a knight fails to serve his own lady? Take our own Lampert, for example. He receives non-stop criticism from Lord Wolfrey for failing to manipulate Rosamund or contain the Lies gangs. But he continues to protect his lord nonetheless. I do not recall raising someone who would abandon his charge in her time of need. It was perfectly clear that she was the mother of a family of knights. Cornelius tightened his expression and nodded. I, too, consider it best for me to move to the sovereignty. Seeing the state of the royal family and the sovereign knights order during the Archduke Conference convinced me that Rosamund should not go there without as much protection as possible. Quite, Lenore agreed. The Trug affected were punished, it would seem, but it remains a concern that the source has not been found. I can at least take comfort in the knowledge that Matthias is going to the sovereignty as well, given his sensitivity to the scent. Which is, good. So Cornelius and Lenore were both set on accompanying me. The problem was deciding what to do about the timing of their wedding. Cornelius would also need to consider his plans for the estate he had received from Eckert. Lenore will need to quit her job upon getting married, Elvira said, so you will need 2 years of preparation time, as was originally the plan. After you move to the sovereignty, find more female knights for Rosamund within the year. I shall tend to Eckert's estate such that they can be used whenever you or he returns. Cornelius offered a small smile and said, perhaps it would be better to give the place to Sigrid? He was of course referring to Lampert and Aurelia's son. It is much too early to consider an option like that. He has only recently begun to crawl, you know. Oh, I want to see him! Come on, let us see him! Mother, I interjected, I have yet to even meet Sigrid. I'd hoped that I would at least be able to glimpse him now that I was back at the estate, but neither Lampert nor Aurelia were anywhere to be seen, so the same was naturally true of their baby. Everyone has become a lot more guarded since Bettina from Ahrensbach was imprisoned during the purge. Oh, she was imprisoned. I thought she was executed. Elvira explained, Aurelia has become especially wary in order to protect her child, and you have so many retainers whom she does not know. For that reason, she is unlikely to feel comfortable enough to meet with you, but I can assure you that she rejoices when she received your gift. In any case, this is a discussion for another time. We must prioritize preparing for your departure. Elvira went on to request the names of the retainers due to accompany me to the sovereignty. I divided them into 3 groups, those who were definitely coming with me, those who were definitely staying behind, and those who were still unsure. She nodded all the while, then let out a heavy sigh and turned to Lazletta. Gracia only recently became Rosamund's retainer, correct? It seems much too unreasonable for have her be the only attendant going to the sovereignty. I tended to serve their lord or lady more intimately than any other kind of retainer, and your lady will struggle to relax even in her own room if she does not have someone she trusts and who has plenty of experience there with her. Lazletta, is there no way for you to go? Mother, Lazletta is her house's successor, and she's already engaged to Wilfried's scholar, Thorsten, I said, explaining the situation on Lazletta's behalf so that she wouldn't be criticized. She cannot leave Ehrenfest. Ottilie looked openly exasperated and shook her head. Of course she would say that when the flow of information is being restricted and she cannot consult her parents or her fiancé. You asked everyone what they wanted to do, but did not state your own desires, I expect. No, but I couldn't state my desires. Will my retainers not have interpreted them as an order? If someone of a higher status made a request, then those who ranked below them had no choice but to obey. That was why I had asked my retainers what they wanted, instead of stating what I wanted from each of them. Respecting others' wishes is important, Elvira said, but so is making your own wishes clear. Those in your service are unlikely to move to the sovereignty unless they are completely certain that you want them to join you. If you tell me now that you desire Lazletta's continued service, and she expresses a desire to follow you, then I will do the necessary legwork to make it feasible. I gazed at Lazletta. In truth, I did want her to come with me. She had served as my attendant since I first joined the Royal Academy, and while her work never really stood out, she always did what I needed, like a considerate hand willing to scratch an itch whenever one appeared. Having her with me would come as an immense relief. However, upon hearing Leslie's original answer, I'd accepted that she was staying behind without the slightest hesitation. She was currently wearing her usual smile, but she was nowhere near as transparent as her sister. I couldn't tell whether she actually wanted to move to the Sovereignty. If I said that I wanted her to accompany me, it was likely that both sisters would cancel their engagements for my sake. With the duchy in its current position, I could not bear to take more people than is absolutely necessary. My retainers are all the best of the best, and I suspect they are needed here more than ever. Lesletta will support Brunhilde when she becomes Sylvester's second wife, and will for the sake of Ehrenfest. Oh, enough of that, Elvira said. No matter how talented your retainers might be, the castle's daily affairs are not going to fall apart in the absence of a select few who spend so much of their time in the temple to begin with. It would be one thing if you were gathering together a massive group to form a faction in the Sovereignty, but how much harm is the loss of your personal retainers really going to cause? So, I needed to focus on the personal circumstances of each retainer rather than the problems facing the duchy as a whole. Elvira went on to note that a princess who moved to the Sovereignty with the smallest possible entourage would inspire the sovereign nobles to look down on her as well as her duchy. Elvira continued, you are welcome to take whomever you will need to ensure your safety and emotional well-being. Now state your wishes clearly so that they are properly understood. If you and Lesletta are both on the same page, then as I said, I will make sure that your desires are met. I am your mother. The least I can do is grant my daughter a single wish. Now write a positive answer from Lesletta and take her to the Sovereignty with you. She then pushed me forward until Lesletta and I were standing face to face. Karstead and Bonifacius were silently cheering me on from the sidelines. Cornelius was smirking to himself, and Lenore was watching intently as if expecting to see something truly heartwarming. Lesletta herself was patiently waiting for me to speak, a calm smile on her face while Angelica beside her was wearing her usual expression. What is this, a public love confession? Am I really supposed to ask Lesletta to come with me when you're all acting like this? I know, it's so weird! My cheeks grew hot and my eyes teary as everyone watched us closely. I was just barely resisting the urge to run away. If I asked Lesletta to stay by my side and she refused, I would probably drop dead on the spot. Mother! It is your duty to secure her approval, Elvira said, clearly amused as she went back to her own seat. We are waiting. Do I have to do this in front of you? Jeez! I shouldn't have to do this in front of y'all! I would need to say something to get out of my current predicament, so, Lesletta? Yes, Lady Rosamund, she replied, unmistakably amused. She's thinking this is funny. It's not! It's so weird! Her dark green eyes were narrowed in an impish smile, but as she awaited my declaration, her cheeks started to redden as well. Even amid this blur of emotions, one thing was clear to me. She wasn't feeling troubled or bothered in the slightest. Knowing that we were both feeling embarrassed made me feel even more nervous, but I could sense that Lesletta was likely to accept my request, and that gave me the courage to speak. I took a deep breath, then vomited the words out as quickly as I could. Lesletta, if you would come with me to the Sovereignty, then that would really warm my heart. I will do my best to protect you, to ensure that no ills befall you, to make sure you are not overworked, and, I will also raise your pay, and allow you to keep a veritable nest of shoe mills in your room. So, please come with me. Oh my god! Shoe mills! Rosamund, you need a shoe mill of your own. Lesletta would love that! I wonder how long we live for. That's what I wonder. I said absolutely everything that was on my mind. I wasn't sure how, but I managed it. As I exhaled, Lesletta smiled joyfully and wiped away the tears forming in the corners of my eyes. I will be glad to, as long as my house's affairs can be put in order. What are you going to do about your engagement? I smiled in response, at which point Cornelius came over and took my hand. He was still smirking as he peered down at my flushed cheeks and said, Rosamund, I'd feel a lot better about going to the Sovereignty if you asked me like that. No! Not happening! Not happening, I exclaimed. Doing it once was enough. Oh my god. I think this is the first time that she's ever gotten really truly embarrassed in something like this. Mother and daughter. By the time my embarrassing confession was over, it was late enough that Lesletta, Lenore, and Angelica all needed to go home. In other words, our first discussion had come to an end. Cornelius and Bonifacius led the trio off while I stood in the entrance hall. Mother, I said, I must now return to my room. One moment. Allow me to join you. There is much we need to discuss. So Elvira accompanied me. My stay in this estate had only been brief, but my room had always been kept in order so that I could use it whenever I wanted. It really warmed my heart. You never did register your mana with the hidden room here, did you? Elvira asked. Come with me. Someone your age will never usually enter a hidden room with a parent, but let us experience it at least once before you leave. I should want you to know how to register yourself and your own children when the time comes. Ferdinand and I already registered our mana to a hidden room in the temple, but I'm gonna keep that to myself. I wouldn't put it past Elvira to pull a diptych out of thin air and start furiously writing down ideas. Yes, she would! You know she would! It was so easy to imagine Elvira's eyes lighting up that I decided just to thank her and perform the registration in silence. Her eyes crinkled in a show of nostalgia as we approached the door by the bed, placed our hands on its face stone, and poured our mana into it together. As your mother, I would have liked to prepare this hidden room when you first arrived, in case your emotions became too much for you to bear. However, because Lord Ferdinand came to watch over you, there was no occasions when you became anxious or depressed, even though you had just come to a new home and were having to call strangers family. As a new mother to you, I determined that you could feel more at ease staying with Lord Ferdinand than holding up in a hidden room, so I missed the opportunity to make it. Elvira's hand was covering mine, and there was a pleasant warmth in her touch. I watched the mana lines race along the door, and a ticklish feeling overcame me as the hidden room started to form behind it. There was no longer a doubt in my mind when I first arrived at the estate. Elvira truly had been prepared to welcome me as her own daughter. Yeah, that's insane. That she would actually take you in when she one, didn't even know you, two, knew you were the daughter of, or thought you were the daughter of one of her husband's wives that had died, and three, she didn't have to. Didn't have to, essentially, but she did it anyway. Attendants brought a table and 2 chairs into the barren room to prepare us some drinks. We were going to have our own 2-person tea party in the hidden room. Now, where shall we begin? Elvira mused aloud. I suppose we could discuss Feline and Daniel, whom I elected not to mention earlier. Feline and Daniel, I repeated, looking at her quizzically. I couldn't think of a reason why she would wait until now to speak about them. Elvira smiled. I did not wish to put pressure on you while we were in the company of others. A lord or lady should have the freedom to decide what they do with their retainers. So I will state my desire, then I will accept whatever you think is best. She seemed a bit more casual than I was used to, and it was in a relaxed tone that she continued. Could you leave Feline and Daniel in Ehrenfest? There are many reasons for my request, but to focus on one that applies to them both, there are almost no lay nobles in the sovereignty. Were they to go with you, I suspect they would feel even more uncomfortable than they do in Ehrenfest. She went on to tell me that while men nobles and archnobles sometimes brought lay noble attendants to the sovereignty with them, she had never heard of any lay knights or lay scholars going there. The mere suggestion of them serving a princess was therefore unthinkable. We had already agreed that I would scope out the sovereignty for a while before deciding whether to move the Gutenbergs there. Elvira wanted us to do the same thing for Feline and Daniel. At the same time, Elvira continued, it would benefit Ehrenfest to have those who are comfortable with their methods and capable of communicating with the lower cities stay here even longer. There are grave concerns that your departure will cause the duchy's nobles to revert to their old ways. Only a select few people had a good grasp on my methods and could properly interact with the lower city. Indeed, here in Ehrenfest, Feline and Daniel were very much on demand. Although our plan was to finish the printing industry handover during the next year, that wouldn't be enough time for us to fully rework our noble culture. Elvira also believed that Brunhilde would struggle to stay in constant contact with the lower city after becoming the Duchess's second wife. The same is true for the temple handover, she said. Feline and Daniel have spent a tremendous amount of time by your side, assisting Lord Ferdinand with his work. Having them stay will make an enormous difference. As it stands, Lord Melkor and his retainers will be forced to bear a crushing burden. Melkor was going to have his hands full with rituals, sure, but I really didn't expect them to be any issues with the temple's administration. I planned to lead them my temple attendants, and some of the blue priests like Camphor and Freytik were already doing impressive amounts of work. But when I said as much to Elvira, she gave me a half smile and shook her head. You might not agree with this since you were raised in the temple, but retainers of the archducal family will not want to ask the blue priests to educate them. It's a matter of pride. Lay nobles are still nobles, and while they will not hesitate to learn from fellow archducal retainers, as a former commoner, I didn't see the blue priests as so beneath me that I would be loath to ask them for advice. Again, though my common sense as a noble was flawed, Elvira explained that to ensure the temple handover went smoothly, I would need to be more considerate of Melkor's retainers. Hartman was taught by Lord Ferdinand, correct? She asked. I originally intended to have him stay in Ehrenfest as both the high priest and an archnoble who could intimidate other nobles. But he gave you his name before I could even approach him. I suppose you will need an arch scholar with you, so there's something to be done about that. To think Hartman was one step ahead of Mother all along, I mused. His reasons for forcing his name on me were evidently more complex than I'd imagined. I don't really think so. I think the main reason is because he didn't want to be left behind. Elvira continued, if you wish to keep Feline and Daniel with you, despite the many reasons to leave them here, might I suggest moving them to the sovereignty with the Gutenbergs once you come of age. Excuse me? The Gutenbergs cannot be moved right away. In the meantime, will you not want people here who know about your circumstances? This will prove crucial if you wish to keep your true family safe, you know. Oh! Wait a minute here! She knew! Did they tell her? Or did she figure that out on her own? Oh, shit! She knows about her being a commoner! Holy crap! I gasped. Avara's eyes widened and then she laughed. Goodness, what's that expression? I know you were a commoner since the day I took you in. They would not tell me whose daughter you were, but it only took a little bit of probing into the commoners you hold so dear to figure that out as well. Excuse me? Excuse me? Nobody had told me that Elvira knew my secret. I tried to pass myself off as a genuine noble whenever I was around her, but she's known that I was a commoner the whole time. I can hardly believe it. You intend to move your family to the sovereignty alongside the Gutenbergs, correct? I believe Daniel is best suited to protect them until that day comes. But why wait for when I come of age? It was true that I would need to inspect the sovereignty first, but I wouldn't come of age for another 3 years. The handover would take 1 year, but waiting 2 more after that felt superfluous, especially when I wanted to relocate the printing industry right away. Why? Good grief, Rosemine. I understand that your current lifestyle and Ob Ehrenfest's flexibility make you prone to forget this, but underage children are not normally entrusted with major industries. You would do well to understand that you will not have the same freedom with businesses and the like in the sovereignty as you do here. Sylvester had always given me the freedom to do as I pleased since I'd started the industry in the first place, but the duchy was supposed to be in charge. Those who had yet to come of age would normally have this matter of work taken from them. Furthermore, Karstead has told me that you are currently the Zet candidate closest to obtaining the Greciaschite. Does it not follow, then, that you will need to take care of all sorts of Dutch duties before you can even consider diving into the printing industry? You're going to be educated as a royal and such, I imagine. That hadn't even crossed my mind. I'd assumed that I would be able to do whatever I wanted after obtaining the Greciaschite, handing it to Sigiswald and saving Ferdinand, assuming that I could obtain the Greciaschite in the first place. But it was more likely that I would be thrown straight into a royal education. Will you truly manage as a princess, Rosemine? Elvira asked, inspecting me with doubtful eyes. I groaned and slumped my shoulders. Not even I thought I would manage, but things were being decided and moving forward anyway. There was no helping it. There are also other reasons to wait. Feline will come of age at the same time as you, allowing her to move to the sovereignty without giving her name. I should not need to tell you that I do not condone name swearing being used as a means of moving to the sovereignty, and to speak truthfully, I do not believe you should take responsibility for any more lives. Seeing all the orphans and my name sworn retainers had apparently made Elvira worry that I was biting off more than I could chew. But I was the one who took Feline as a retainer and got her away from the trouble she was facing at home, I replied. I cannot make her go back there. Returning her to that home with her father and stepmother was unthinkable. Feline is the proper successor to her house. Her father merely married into the family. Thus, it would be easy to return the house to her, or if not, I could always look after her as I do Muriella. I should note, though, if she does go to the sovereignty, she will need to be engaged to ensure her protection. How would you feel about pairing her with Daniel? What? Her suggestion had come so out of the blue that I cried out despite myself. Elvira watched me for a moment, clearly amused. Because lady nobles were seldom seen in the sovereignty, she explained, Feline and Daniel will need to rely on each other for support. I expect there will be no shortage of nobles trying to approach your retainers, so Feline might have other options. But at this rate, Daniel will struggle to take a wife at all. Would it not be possible for Daniel to wed a men noble? I asked, hopeful that climbing a rank was in the cards for him. I'm told he has the man quality of a lesser men noble, so I thought he might manage somehow. Elvira blinked. He may have talent in your highest praise, but his public reputation leaves much to be desired. As far as anyone is concerned, he is a disgraced lay noble who might be removed from your services at any time. Not even the most generous men noble will want to marry him. Yes, there was his romance with Bridget, but that came to be under what was frankly miraculous circumstances. Bridget's own reputation was damaged after she abruptly canceled her engagement and started visiting the temple. She had an opportunity to get closer to Daniel through work. Her brother, Gabe Ildner, had wanted to foster a good relationship with you. She was getting old enough that no other man was approaching her, and she had shown a burning desire to repopulate her house. She was right. It was unwise to have my expectations for Daniel on his previous relationship with Bridget, or base my expectations. Instead, I tried to imagine him with Feline. They were definitely close, and while it was possible that Feline was more taken with the idea of being in love, I'd gotten the impression that she at least had some feelings for him. Daniel once said that Feline had feelings for Roderick, so this might be difficult. He clearly treats her like a child and does not see her as a potential spouse in the slightest. I see. I thought they would make for a wonderful couple, a knight graciously looking after a lovely young woman who had cut ties with her family and wished to follow after her lady. He would have protected her until adulthood, their feelings for one another growing all the while, but she And alas, Mother, is that material for your next book? I asked, my cheeks puffed out. You are taking far too much inspiration from my retainers. Elvira took out a diptych and started to write, a distinct sparkle in her dark eyes. It certainly is important to note down ideas as they spring to mind, lest you forget them. In any case, do inform Daniel of my suggestion. The most I can do is arrange a prospective bride and offer my best wishes for how their relationship develops. I will not be involved in the final decision. That is for them to make. I considered Elvira's proposal. She had said that she could take Feline into her care while we made our arrangements, but she had said nothing about looking after Daniel. Mother, will my absence thrust Daniel into an unstable position? I asked. Would you care for him as well as for Feline? She cast her eyes upward. I would be able to protect him to some extent, assuming that he and Feline were engaged, but it is best to leave men to their own kind, Rosemine. Might I suggest entrusting him to Lord Bonifacius so that he might preserve his connection to the royal archducal family? He will need to undergo a lot of training before he can move to the sovereignty. If he continues to train while commuting to the temple, I expect he will not receive any harsh words from the nobility. Very well, I will ask Grandfather to look after him if Daniel wishes it. I was relieved to know that Elvira had, in fact, been thinking of ways to help Daniel as well, but as I was admiring her kindness, her dark eyes sparkled again, and a teasing smile crept onto her face, the same one that Cornelius had given me a short while ago. Rosemine, Lord Bonifacius will accept in a heartbeat if you ask him as adorably as you did Laisletta. Mother! I exclaimed, fixing her with the firmest glare I could manage. Elvira laughed off my complaint and returned to her diptych, scribbling down something or other. Then she looked outside and wiped it from her teacup with a satisfied smile. Not that long ago, if someone had told me that I would one day have the freedom to indulge in my hobbies, I would never have believed them. I am ever so grateful to you. The years before you came were my hardest, Rosemine. Would you care to hear about them? I nodded, though I already knew bits and pieces about Elvira's past. I never heard the full story. My wedding to Karstedt came about from the Lies King's desperation to protect themselves from Lady Veronica. We were not particularly close, nor were we particularly antagonistic to one another, so our marriage came entirely out of obligation. However, Lady Veronica's attendant, Trudelaide, became his second wife when he independently decided to take Rosemary as his third, throwing our house into chaos. Any time the second and third wives had butted heads, Karstedt had always showed favoritism to Rosemary. Elvira had thus needed to maintain the balance by allying with Trudelaide, thereby maintaining appearances for Veronica. Soon after Rosemary's passing, Trudelaide bore a child. Lady Veronica rejoiced at the news, declaring the baby to be best suited to become Lord Karstedt's successor. I found myself steadily being pushed out of my position and driven into a corner. Lord Adalbert had taken ill not long after, and Veronica's dominance had reached its peak. Meanwhile, at Karstedt's estate, Rosemary's death had started a war between Elvira and Trudelaide, wherein the second wife was borrowing her lady's power. Karstedt had started using work as an excuse to avoid going home. I'm well aware that power struggles are a pain, but come on, Father, that's just wrong. Then the previous Archduke, Lord Adalbert, passed away. Lord Ferdinand lost his shield and entered the temple, succumbing to Lady Veronica's pressure, while Eckert, who had sworn his name to the young lord, quickly fell into despair. It was Heidemarie who supported him during this low point. Eckert had married Heidemarie, and the subsequent reveal that she was pregnant had seemed to cheer him up considerably. But then she was poisoned, and in the blink of an eye, Eckert lost both his wife and unborn child. Oh, poor Eckert! Poor guy! The tragedy took a heavier toll on him than anyone could bear to witness. I never knew, I muttered. Eckert had just started to get back on his feet when you arrived, and it was not the right time for any of us to tell you. Even when Eckert was still despondent, Veronica had probed Elvira about having him serve Wilfrid as a guard knight. Elvira had declined, saying that her son was in no state for such a position, and as Veronica had instead made the same demand of Sylvester and Karstedt. They both refused as well for various reasons, Elvira explained. It turned into something quite miserable. Lady Veronica would say that it failed to raise Eckert properly, that swearing loyalty to Lord Ferdinand was treason to the Archduke, and so on. Lamprecht, well aware of the situation, volunteered to take the position himself, since he would be of age by the time Lord Wilfrid was baptized. In other words, Lamprecht had accepted the burden to end the suffering his mother and brother were going through. At once, Lady Veronica overwhelmed Lamprecht with unreasonable demands. He was to court Ernstbach nobles and take one as his bride, and to know that guard knights must show complete obedience to their lord at all times. I protested what our son was going through, but Karstedt did not listen to me particularly closely. Bemoaning what Lamprecht was having to endure, Elvira had implored her husband to speak with Sylvester about improving the situation. Sylvester had barely listened to him, though, and in any case, Karstedt had known about Elvira's long-standing conflict with Veronica, so he had merely laughed it off and remarked that Wilfrid was just like young Sylvester, in his tendency to run away from everything. Oh, that's all too easy to imagine. As he grew up, Cornelius saw his 2 elder brothers being dragged about by their lords and resolved never to take one himself. He stopped trying with the studies, which was so very frustrating to me. I knew he had the potential to go far, but he refused to take anything seriously. Oh yeah, and at the start, Cornelius hadn't been an honor student or anything. I thought back to before the Raise Angelica's grade squadron when he had said that he needed grades fit for an archnoble and nothing more. Lord Adalbert's death enabled Lady Veronica to wield her power even more flagrantly. Haldensdale and my home province faced ever tighter constraints while the Lyskings lost more and more power. I spent every day in misery, unable to envision a future that did not end with Lady Veronica crushing my sons and me. Now that I knew more about noble society, I understood just how terribly awkward life must have been for Elvira. She was the first wife of the Knight Commander, but she had been on bad terms with the Archduke's mother and struggled to communicate with both her husband and the Abb himself. It was then that Lady Veronica was suddenly detained, Elvira said. Lord Sylvester had moved against her despite our assumption that he had chosen to remain his mother's puppet. After making an announcement regarding the movement of nobles from other duchies, Sylvester had disappeared over and over again, often for days at a time. Soon the nobles' quarter was abuzz with rumors that something had happened to the Abb. He then made an abrupt return midway through the Archduke conference, whereupon he dismissed the High Bishop, whom his mother had always protected, and sent Veronica to the Ivory Tower as punishment for her misdeeds. Karstedt similarly returned from the Archduke conference and spent countless days busily dealing with Ehrenfest's criminals. Even after witnessing it with my own eyes, I could not comprehend what was happening. Thinking about it from a noble's perspective, what Sylvester did really was insane. Even I'm taken aback, like he chose to do all that during the Archduke conference of all times. Amid the chaos, Karstedt suddenly told me that the Commoner Shrine maiden responsible for Lady Veronica's deposition was going to be baptized into our family. He said that the Abb would adopt her immediately afterwards, so it would not place too much of a burden on me. What? I explained, you were about to become my mother. No matter how swiftly I might have been adopted afterward, it wouldn't have reduced the amount of work forced upon you, both before and after my adoption. Indeed, the carelessness of men. Despite that inconvenience, Elvira had agreed to the arrangement for a number of reasons. I was the cause of Veronica's downfall. I possessed an abundance of mana, which had contributed to the full chalices being sent to Haldensdale, and Ferdinand, my active guardian, had personally asked her to accept. Still, I said, I'm surprised you went along with it. Taking a commoner as your daughter couldn't have been easy. I debated it for some time, but then Karstedt ventured that your joining the Archducal family would make it far more likely for your guardian, Lord Ferdinand, to return to noble society when the time was right. Egbert rejoiced upon hearing this. It was my first time seeing him smile in so long, longer than I can remember. Your adoption would help both Ferdinand and my son, and that was reason enough to accept you. I would never have guessed how much more you would do for me. Elvira had gotten a new lease on life when Ferdinand eventually returned to noble society. In his elation, he had even started visiting the temple to serve his lord there. There as well. The Emperor was similarly sage when I helped his Lord Wolfried escape disinheritance, even if only by the skin of his teeth. My introduction of so many new trends that had allowed Elvira's faction to crush the women of the Veronica faction, while Cornelius' efforts to help Angelica with her studies had done wonders for his own grades. Elvira continued, the printing industry has allowed me to devote so much time to my hobbies, not to mention the wealth it has brought Haldensdale. After your adoption, everything in my life began to go well. Even my marriage became far more than just an obligation. As we discussed how we would raise you, Karstedt and I came to develop a more genuine connection. Nice! Ever since the first time I'd seen them together, I'd assumed that Karstedt and Elvira had a good relationship, at least for one born from a political engagement. But apparently that hadn't always been the case. My move to Karstedt's estate had prompted Ferdinand to visit every few days, which had in turn prompted Karstedt to spend more time at home. He'd also needed to play a more active role in my education, because he had accepted me into his house and made a promise to Ferdinand that he would care for me. He hadn't been able to defer all of my questions to Elvira as he had always done with his sons. There also hadn't been much time before my baptism when I would be adopted by the Archduke, and my complete lack of noble common sense had required him and Elvira to actually work together. I was, and still am, grateful to you, and it was my every intention to support you as your mother. However, I could see that you felt more at ease in the temple with Lord Ferdinand, and it seemed unnecessary to force you to spend time with me instead, especially when you had your adoptive mother, Lady Florencia, waiting for you in the castle. In the end, Elvira had decided that she would simply watch over me, ready to be my safety net if ever the need arose. There hadn't been much to worry about with Ferdinand looking after me, but then a royal decree had sent him to Ahrensbach. I was deeply concerned when you lost your pillar of support, but I was also at a loss for what to do. Given your age, I didn't want to overstep any boundaries. It would have been one thing to give him a proper farewell after a reasonable preparation period, but his departure came so suddenly in such a bad time. Let me just make sure. Okay, it's still going. Okay. I needed to return to the Royal Academy right after Ferdinand departed, so Alvara had resolved to keep a watchful eye on me once again. She would visit and see whether I got back on my own feet during the academic year, and whether Wilfried, my fiancé, stepped up to support me now that Ferdinand was gone. From there, she would determine whether it was best to reach out to me as my mother. In preparation for the purge, she said, Lord Ferdinand tasked me with laying the groundwork necessary to keep the Liesgangs in check. But when winter socializing began, we had just begun to contact them. Unexpected news from the Royal Academy required us to start the purge early. The proper foundations had yet to be laid, so the Liesgangs got much more carried away than expected. To resolve this, Brunhilde had agreed to become Sylvester's second wife, and to work with Alvara to contain the Liesgangs. The purge had put its elders in exceptionally high spirits, but they were expected to calm down as time went on. And yet, before the dust had even begun to settle, Wilfried had stated his intention to visit the Liesgangs during spring prayer to earn their support. As you might recall, Lampert tried to stop them, stating that none of the necessary preparations had been made, but Lord Wilfried went through with his plan nonetheless. To nobody's surprise, Wilfried managed only to stoke the flames. Alvara explained that Guy Liesgang had contacted her afterward, informing her that the elders were uncontrollably furious. The harrowing news had made the blood drain from her face, so she had gone to Brunhilde, and the two had started to discuss ways to contain the Liesgangs once again. But then the Archduke Conference had arrived, and my adoption by the king had been decided. The situation keeps changing before I can even find my feet, Alvara lamented. I am impressed that Lord Ferdinand was able to keep up with you for so long. Things might not have been too bad if the duchy were at peace, but the purge had brought about great unrest. To make matters worse, Ferdinand, the one person who had been keeping everything under control, was gone. Alvara felt his absence all too keenly. I must admit, she continued with a sad smile, yet it has crossed my mind countless times, though we might have been able to keep Lord Ferdinand in Ehrenfest if only we had made him your fiancé instead of Wilfried. It is too late for that now, though. I sipped my tea and gave her a small smile. I cannot imagine being engaged to Ferdinand. My focus has only been on ways to rescue him if something were to happen in Arensbach. You have already ensured that he will not be punished alongside Lady Detlinde, correct? Excellent work. She reached out, stroked my cheek, and said, You truly have done well. Aww. She gets some praise. She's been starved for any kind of affection, essentially, since she became a noble. And that's been what? She was 8 at the time, but she became made 7. So she's been starved for attention for 6 years, essentially. I couldn't help but lean into her kind, gentle hand. This is the first time anyone has praised me for that negotiation, I murmured, casting my eyes down as a sudden warmth spread through my chest. Tears streamed down my cheeks without warning. Well, it was an act of compassion for someone in another duchy. Nobody can praise you openly for that, nor would they think to in private. This would most likely be the only time I can say this, but your actions have made my heart soar with joy. By rescuing Lord Ferdinand, you have saved not 1 life, but 3. Yeah, because if he had died, Eckert and Justice would have too, because I don't know if he would have had time to give them back their names. My actions had apparently saved Eckert and Justice as well as Ferdinand. I nodded, mentally adding Lostrom to that list. Yeah, 4 lives. Those 3 lives, technically 4, are safe thanks to you and what you have accomplished, Alvara concluded. Be good, proud. Mother, it is only natural to worry for someone who has moved away, especially when you know their life is in danger. Of course, such concerns should not be made public, but I worry about Eckert and Lord Ferdinand as well. Riarda is definitely concerned about Justice. It had seemed to me as nobody in Ehrenfest cared about Ferdinand. Eckert and Justice, now that they had moved to Arensbach, but that wasn't true. Those who cared were just better at keeping their feelings to themselves. Knowing that put me at ease. I was told not to worry about Ferdinand and the others, I said. I seemed as though everyone else had stopped caring about them entirely, and that really hurt. That was when I started to get so stubborn, I think. If nobody else was going to look out for them, then I would do it all on my own. Alvara looked down, her eyes now brimming with tears. My daughter is being adopted by the king, and one of my sons has been handpicked to serve as a royal retainer. Once we leave this room, I will not be allowed to show anything but pride for those accomplishments, so... This brave opportunity to grieve over my 2 children moving so far away. Oh, Mother. I'd already known that nobles used their hidden rooms to express their hidden emotions, but this was my first time actually seeing it. You probably saw it with Ferdinand, since I think he was a bit more relaxed in his hidden room than out in the open. But this is the first time you're actually actively seeing it. Because, like I said, even though Ferdinand kind of relaxed, he didn't really let his guard down completely. Avara, who had always known for her calm smiles and plotting from the shadows, was now scrunching up her face and sobbing. I am worried about those who went to Arensbach, but I also fear that your small shoulders will need to bear the entire future of our country, she said, hurrying her voice, her feelings so openly. And seeing the tears pouring down her face hit me straight in the chest. The royal family was focused on whether they would be able to obtain the Grucheshite and what they would do if they did. The Archducal family was focused on how to lead Ehrenfest after my departure. How many among them were worried about what might happen to me if the Grucheshite ended up in my hands? Once again, the most I could manage was a quiet mother. I'd always been taught that nobles would never act soft on one another, so I thought it pointless to even try. But now, for the first time, I extended a hand to Elvira just like I'd done with Aunt Mom so long ago. Dang it, why can't nobles just be affectionate to one another in private, you know? Why can't they? Like in their own homes. Yes, I can understand doing that, out in public. Can't do that out in public. Why can't they be affectionate towards others, their own families, at home, Even with their retainers around. Seriously. Even just a hug. Seriously. What's wrong with doing hugs? Jeez. She clasped it, then squeezed it tight. There really was someone else who shared my sadness. There is. There's probably more than one. Riara's probably feeling the same way for justice. And I'm sure that Sylvester and Florencia are worried about you too. They just aren't saying it. Because they're the archducal couple. They gotta keep up appearances, even in private. Because they're retainers. Rosamund, the weight you are about to carry is not one I can carry with you, but I will do whatever it takes to ensure that you can leave Ehrenfest behind without any concerns or regrets. Stay true to yourself and continue to forge your own way. When you obtain the Grucheshite, use it not as a bludgeon of power, but as a tool to secure your wishes. I know you can do it. You are my daughter, after all. Okay. Magic tools for children. Elvira and I spent ages together in the Hidden Room. I told her how Cornelius had spent his time at the Royal Academy, where she hadn't been able to keep an eye on him, and what Eckert had used to do when visiting the temple, among other things. In return, she told me about Sigrid and Aurelia and how hard Brunhilde was working. Our conversation went on for such a long time that I ended up exhausted. I slept better than ever that night. In fact, I overslept. When the estate attendants informed me that it was almost third bell, I wanted to cry out and ask why they hadn't roused me sooner. As it turned out, Elvira had instructed them to let me sleep since she had kept me up later than usual. Still, it was unbelievably embarrassing to have overslept after my guard knights came to get me. Good morning, I said as I entered the dining hall. You took your time, Cornelius replied, teasing me for oversleeping. Everyone else is already here. I apologized to the guard knights, then worked my way through my fairly late breakfast. It is good to know you slept well, Elvira said, casually sipping her tea as I ate. Do you have a moment to talk before you return to the castle? We launched into a discussion about the printing industry's handover. Miriella was standing behind Elvira and doing what appeared to be some very scholarly work. I could guess from how bright and enthusiastic she looked that things were going well between them. If we can manage commoner meetings without you, then I do not expect us to encounter any problems worth worrying about, Elvira said. Which reminds me, Rosamund. You said that you plan to leave your temple attendance with Lord Melkor, but what of your artists? I will summon a woman to the sovereignty when we start printing there, I declared. Don't expect me to hand her over, Mother. She's mine. My, what a shame, Elvira sighed, not sounding disappointed at all. Well, she's got her own artist, so I think she's good. Then she chuckled. Do you not worry that someone might buy her after you leave this temple? She will have even less of a place in the sovereignty than your lay nobles. So perhaps you could purchase her now, then entrust her to someone else? That should put your mind at ease until you come of age, should it not? And that will also give you plenty of time to request her services, I said, having seen right through her. Elvira chuckled again. She clearly took great interest in Wilma's artistic talent. I mean, she's right. That would put my mind at ease, but I need to see how Wilma feels about it. Wilma has been looking after the orphanage, I explained, so we will need to find someone to take her place, and she will need to agree, of course. You are mistaken, Rosamund. Once you leave, I will obtain her. And as a Grey Shrine Maiden not in the service of a noble, she will have no choice in the matter. Keep that in mind as you make plans for your attendance. I was immediately reminded of the way that other Grey Shrine Maidens had been treated upon losing their noble masters. I'd assumed that the temple would continue to operate as I pleased, as long as I gave instructions before leaving for the sovereignty, but that had apparently been naive of me. Very well, I said, I will consider this carefully. That will be wise. Subsequently, I informed Daniel of our conversation last night. Oh dear. Daniel, you've got some stuff to think about. I turned to look at Daniel, who remained stone-faced as he stood guard. I will respect your wishes, I said to him, so please tell me when you make a decision. Yes, my lady. As our conversation continued, an ordinance from Sylvester arrived. 12 magic tools for children had arrived from the royal family. Not only is this sudden, but they have sent fewer than we agreed upon, I noted. Why would they do this and risk our agreement falling through? I do not think they intend to sabotage your adoption. Rather, they have sent you a portion of your payment now to reinforce its legitimacy. Considering how desperately we need new nobles and the problems that waiting another year would cause for us, I cannot see Ehrenfest being able to refuse these tools. It will be best for you to return to the castle at once. Come back when you have the time, though, that we may speak again. Yes, mother. Immediately upon my return to the castle, I was summoned to an Archducal family meeting to discuss what we should do with the newly received magic tools. We decided to accept them, in large part because we needed to increase Ehrenfest's noble population as quickly as possible, but also because we had nothing to gain from refusing them. For the royal family to have sent us an advance payment in the first place, they must have been determined to secure my adoption, and sending back the tools wouldn't change the fact. Refusing would only delay our plans by an entire year, and it would mean more children who couldn't be baptized. Given how many we received, could we not send some to the orphanage, I asked Sylvester? Unless they can obtain noble levels of mana by their baptism, it will only be a waste of potions. And then there's the enormous amount of strain it would put on their bodies. Rather than using the magic tools now and ending up with a bunch of extra lay nobles, we'll be better off saving them for any man of rich children who might be born in the future. I wasn't surprised. I'd expected an outright refusal, but then he raised an eyebrow at me and continued, so if we do send the tools to the orphanage, they'll need to be given to orphans who have an adequate mana and won't cause problems. I'll advise getting Hartman to interview them. I won't be able to trust your evaluation since you have such a soft spot for these kids. Being told that I couldn't be trusted was kind of annoying, but at the same time I couldn't protest. More people than I could remember had told me that I was too soft on those I cared about. So it was decided that Hartman will be responsible for the final interviews, wherein he would check whether the orphans were ideologically aligned, so to speak. Isn't that nice, Rosamund? Melkor asked with a smile. The magic tools won't just go to people from our faction. I'm glad to have more friends in the temple. I nodded. Then, after borrowing a mana measuring tool from Sylvester, I went to the temple with Melkor and his retainers. Welcome back, Lady Rosamund. Thank you, everyone. After my attendants greeted me, I went to the High Bishop's chambers and changed into my robes. Then it was time to listen to everyone's reports. The Blue Priests and Shrine apprentices and orphans were spending their days without incident, and thanks to Camphor and Freytik, the preparations for the spring coming-of-age ceremony were now complete. I am relieved to hear there has been no problems, I said. As for me, I have a grave announcement to make. As my attendants all stood up straight, I explained that I will be leaving Ehrenfest in a year's time, and that Melkor will be taking my place as High Bishop. I didn't include unnecessary details like where I was going, or the fact that I was being adopted by the king. Grey Priests and Shrine Maidens were obligated to answer any questions put to them by nobles, but also it was best to give them as little information as possible. I continued, it is my hope that you will all serve Melkor in his new position and strive to maintain the temple's current state to the best of your ability. We were already working under the assumption that you would resign from your post upon coming of age. This will simply require us to accelerate our schedule, Fran said, then gave a sad smile. In any case, I am used to those I serve leaving me behind. Oh, Fran. Why'd you say it like that? That hurt. My heart ached. I would have liked to move you all to my library, but you've told me before that you feel uncomfortable in the nobles' quarter, did you not? I do not know who will manage my library once I am gone, and since I will not be heading to another temple, there will not be anywhere for you to stay. In an ideal world, I would obtain the Grudershite, dissect Ahrensbach, and then return Ferdinand to Ehrenfest, whereupon he would take all of my temple attendants into his care. But with the future being so uncertain, it was safest to lead them with Melkor. Indeed, Fran said, I only know how to live in the temple. No matter where you are headed, it would not suit me. I am content with the idea of serving Lord Melkor. Based on his words and actions up until this point, I do not expect to encounter any issues. Were I moving to another temple, I would certainly have brought you all with me, I assured everyone. Fran let out a quiet chuckle, and after visiting Haas's monastery, I would certainly have accompanied you. There is one exception, however. Wilma will need to make a choice. A choice, Wilma repeated, looking overcome with concern. Although she had come a long way in conquering her fear of men, it had yet to disappear completely. Over the next year, you will need to decide whether to become my mother's or my personal artist, I said, then convey the details of my discussion with Elvira. But what will happen to the orphanage? It said a lot that her first question was about the children. To preserve its present condition, I intend to negotiate for either Monica or Lily to become Melkor's attendant and take over as its manager. After all, they were the ones who knew Wilma's philosophy best. Upon hearing my explanation, Wilma thanked me for my consideration and smiled, though it wasn't a sincere smile of relief. A quick glance around the room revealed that Monica and Fritz were looking equally as uneasy. But when I met Fritz's eye, his expression suddenly became peaceful. Lady Rosamund, there's no need to be concerned about us, he said. We can sense from your demeanor that this move has come suddenly for you as well, and that you do not want to go. We also understand that you show us far more compassion than anyone else would. Zam nodded. We do not expect the orphanage to be treated poorly under Lord Melkor. However, with how quickly these positions of authority change heads, we do not know how long he will remain the High Bishop. Our concern is a less considerate figure coming into power, and who knows how long they might remain. It was impossible to say when a noble like the previous High Bishop would take control of the temple. Just as I'd wiped away Bezenmont's influence in the blink of an eye, it wouldn't take too long for someone new to wipe away mine. Melkor is a boy, I said, so he's unlikely to be taken out of Ehrenfest. Still, I will devote myself to this handover so that you can all rest easy. We thank you. Next up were the magic tools for the orphanage. It was agreed that Wilma would inform the children born as nobles that they had a chance to receive one if their mana quantity was high enough, and they were able to pass an interview. One must fill the tools with a certain amount of mana in order to become a noble, I said. If we do not give them to the children post-haste, they may fail to meet this requirement. How soon can we hold the interviews? The children are currently visiting the forest, but any time from tomorrow onward will do, Wilma replied. We can ensure they are ready as long as we have a date. I said that I would decide on one with Hartmut, then disperse my attendants. They all went off to carry out their respective jobs. Fran, I said, I wish to speak to Benno of the planting company regarding my move. Meeting with him in the orphanage director's chambers will be ideal. Understood. I will contact them and schedule a meeting. Zam, go to the high priest's chambers and arrange a date to interview the children. As you will. Fritz, I will need a tremendous amount of paper this year. Gather as many towels as you can. Very well. As I gave one instruction after another, I inspected various letters and documents that Monica had brought over. Things did settle down, at which point Feline approached me. Lady Rosamund, she whispered, what about the rejuvenation potions for the orphans who will receive the magic tools? I intend to prepare them myself. Oh, actually, someone told me it was problematic that I only ever entrust my apprentice scholars with paperwork. So perhaps I should leave the brewing to you and Roderick? For obvious reasons, I couldn't assume that Sylvester would conveniently magic up a stash of rejuvenation potions for the children. As the orphanage director, I will need to bear this burden myself. I cannot prepare rejuvenation potions for Conrad on my own, Feline said, so I've given up on him becoming a noble whether we retrieved his magic tool or not. However, if we are giving rejuvenation potions to the children of the orphanage, I would ask that we give some to Conrad as well. Please, Lady Rosamund, she wanted nothing more than to give her brother a chance to live as a noble. I turned to face her. My understanding is that this process will put great strain on the body of any lay noble who attempts it. But if that is what Conrad wants, I shall allow it. Truly, I thank you ever so much. A broad smile spread across Feline's face. She wouldn't have been able to gather the necessary ingredients and to brew enough rejuvenation potions to make Conrad into a noble on her own. Still, as adorable as she was letting her love for her brother distract her from reality. Feline, did you not say that you would give your name to me and purchase Conrad so that you could accompany me to the sovereignty? What will happen after Conrad is made into a noble? I could not bring a minor with me unless he too offered up his name. What? Oh. It costs a fortune to raise a child as a noble. Will you be able to fund his upbringing and pay for him to attend the Royal Academy while you are still a student yourself? Feline fell silent and gazed down at her hands. The salary of an apprentice lay scholar who had run away from home with nothing would scarcely make a dent in the cost of educating two people. At once, she had been building up her savings by doing translating work, and selling information, but it was hard to live as a noble without the established wealth of one's forebears. She wouldn't even be able to afford an outfit for a coming-of-age ceremony unless she started putting money aside now. If you intend to make Conrad a noble, then I was just returning home with him. Lady Rosamund, your father married into your family, did he not? And you were the house's true successor. Mother told me everything. By returning home and taking her estate back from her father and stepmother, Feline would acquire the magic tools and learning materials her forebears had left behind, as well as outfits that would be altered to fit her. She wouldn't have an extravagant life by any means, but it would be better than renting a room in the castle while struggling to support 2 people alone. Now that Conrad has entered the orphanage, I certainly am the true successor of my house, Feline said. However, I will need to wait until my coming of age before I can take over. Returning now would once again put me at the mercy of my father and Lady Jansara, and in any case, I am unsure how many of my mother's belongings are even still in our possession. As it turned out, her mother and stepmother had sold plenty in order to support themselves. Conrad could be baptized in the orphanage and live in the temple as an apprentice blue priest, I suggested. But that would make him an orphan noble under the Ob's care. If you wish for him to be your younger brother, then you must see him return to noble society before his baptism. You should start thinking of a way to resolve your issue, whether that be by staying at home and asking mother to support you, or by marrying an adult man and getting him to protect you from your parents. As I'd said, baptizing Conrad in the orphanage would sever the sibling ties between him and Feline, who was now looking truly miserable. It was sad to say, but it wasn't my fault that baptisms determined one's parents, or that the Ob became the guardian of children baptized in the orphanage. I wasn't in any position to change these facts either. Before we can proceed, I said, you will need to have a very serious conversation with Conrad. Will he really want to drink rejuvenation potions non-stop and endure so much suffering for the sake of being baptized as a noble? And if so, would he rather be baptized in the temple or return home? Feline already had the magic tool that was her mother's heirloom, and since we were distributing rejuvenation potions to the orphanage, I didn't mind giving some to Conrad as well. I couldn't take his future into my hands, though. I wasn't his guardian, and in just a year, I wouldn't be the orphanage director either. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that Daniel was frowning. He had been listening into our conversation. So, the orphanage meeting is being held today. Then I've got my meeting with the planting company tomorrow, I said to remind myself. Hartman nodded. He was carrying the mana measuring tool as we both had made our way to the orphanage, and it won't be long before the spring coming-of-age ceremony or the summer baptisms. Once those have concluded, the Ob will need to go to Ahrensbach, so time really is of the essence. Feline was also accompanying us. She was holding her mother's heirloom, which she had planned to give to Conrad if he decided that he wanted to become a noble with everyone else. Fran and Zom, who were at the head of our group, opened the door to the orphanage for us. Inside were 5 kneeling children between the ages of 3 and 6, all of whom had yet to be baptized. Dirk and Conrad were among them. I could only assume that Wilma or Hartman had already explained the situation to the kids, as they all tensed up when they saw the magic tool we had brought with us. The mana measuring will now begin, Hartman announced, then went straight to the oldest of the children. State your name and age. One's mana capacity naturally increased as one grew older, so we had unique requirements for each age. Hartman checked whether the gathered children had met Sylvester's criteria, then divided them into 2 groups. Dirk and another boy were on the left, while Conrad and 2 boys were on the right. The 2 of you on the left have met the Ob's mana requirements, Hartman declared. If you wished, he would provide you with magic tools. The boy next to Dirk was an especially tiny 3-year-old child who needed Wilma's support just to stand. It was unlikely that he even understood what was being said to him, so Hartman gave up on questioning his intentions and instead turned to Wilma. Wilma, that boy has the mana quantity of a men noble, and there's still an adequate time before his baptism. It would be best to give him a magic tool. He is still too young to come to a decision on his own, so we wish to keep his options open. Of course, Hartman was more concerned about securing the duchy more nobles than about giving the boy more prospects. He then focused on Dirk, who was standing stiffly in place. Now then, Dirk, your mana quantity surpasses the Ob's criteria. Do you wish to receive a magic tool? Wait, one of the boys on the right shouted. Dirk isn't the son of a noble, he's just an orphan. It isn't right for him to be given a magic tool. Dirk said nothing in response. He merely grimaced and cast his eyes down. Hartman blinked at the boy a few times, then cocked his head in a deliberate show of confusion. What are you saying? All of you are orphans. Dirk is one, so are you. You're wrong. My parents are nobles, so a child who has yet to be baptized as a noble has no right to act like one. Hartman said, easily undermining the boy's protests. Here you are an orphan like everyone else. You should know that a noble's worth is their mana, and with that in mind, Dirk is more valuable than you. He then returned his attention to Dirk. Allow me to ask again, do you wish to receive a magic tool? The tenderness with which Hartman had previously looked upon the orphans was gone. Now as he tried to determine whether Dirk wished to be a noble, he wore the scrutinizing expression of an interviewer. Dirk's eyes wandered the room before finally coming to rest on a single person, Delia. She was at the back of the dining hall, chewing on her lip and clasping her hands together, awaiting his answer with bated breath. She looked as pale as when the previous high bishop had stolen Dirk, and her silent pleas resounded throughout my mind. Please don't ask for a magic tool. Please don't leave my side. I don't want to lose my brother. Dirk looked away from Delia and back at Hartman. Then, after taking a slow breath, I do. No, Delia shrieked, her eyes wide with terror. Everyone turned to look at her, except Dirk. He alone continued to face Hartman, meeting his gaze head-on. Lord Hartman, I wish to receive a magic tool. For what purpose? Hartman asked quietly. Because you are starting so late, dyeing a face stone will prove to be a long and arduous process. There is also your beloved older sister who does not wish for you to become a noble. Why do you seek this path nonetheless? What do you intend to do upon joining the nobility? Dirk balled his hands into tight fists, then declared, I want to become a noble. Then I want to become the High Bishop, High Priest, or Orphanage Director. Oh, okay. He can become the Orphanage Director. That would be good. Oh, Hartman replied. He raised an eyebrow in slight amusement, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. The orphanage was an awful place before Lady Rosamund came along. She's the reason we have food to eat and don't freeze in the winter. A very wise and very true observation. Hartman remarked with a few brisk nods, sounding a lot like a teacher praising a good student. Not only that, but Lady Rosamund was the only noble willing to help us when the Grey Priests were in danger. And she can only serve as a High Bishop while underage because the High Priest supporting her. Hartman was thoroughly satisfied with that answer. I couldn't protest since Dirk was speaking in my favor, but I couldn't help but think that his speech was a teeny bit off. Had he fallen victim to Hartman's brainwashing? Last spring, Dirk continued, the Grey Priests and Shrinemans were very concerned about the new High Priest. They didn't know how the temple or the orphanage were going to change. I'd managed to make so many sweeping changes as the orphanage director because Ferdinand, the High Priest at the time, had given me his permission. The fact that I needed to consult him about every little thing in the first place showed which of the two roles held the most authority. Everyone had worried that the new High Priest might oppose any suggestion or even return the orphanage to its old ways. The adult Grey Priest who could remember those bleak times were the most concerned of all. But then Lady Rosamund chose you to perform the role, Lord Hartman. Everyone rejoiced, for you were a kind man who carried out her will to the letter in all things, I must admit. Though, at the time, I was ignorant of what things were like before Lady Rosamund, so I struggled to understand why the adults were so overjoyed. Dirk was launching into what sounded more and more like a planned speech. He hadn't left the orphanage before his baptism, and my retainers were more or less the only outsiders who visited, so he had never had the misfortune of meeting any cruel nobles. He hadn't been able to empathize with the adults' concerns or their subsequent relief as a result. This had also been true when Conrad arrived at the orphanage. While the adults had worried about the appearance of a noble child, Dirk had simply been glad to have another kid who was his age around. Conrad was the same as the rest of us, Dirk continued. Before he arrived, I was the only one who used the black stones that Fran brought us. But then I wasn't alone anymore. As someone with noble origins, Conrad needed to use black face stones to keep his mana from overflowing. This had come as a pleasant surprise to Dirk, who similarly had to use black face stones to deal with his devouring. He'd quickly made a new friend, and it hadn't even crossed his mind that they had such different backgrounds. But the noble children who came in the winter were nothing like Conrad. They were arrogant, and they didn't listen to what the adults said. They would demand to know why they had to do things, all the while declaring that living here was just a temporary embarrassment before they returned to noble society. The noble children had made it painfully clear that they looked down on the adults and orphans, despite having become orphans themselves. That had been the first time that Dirk, someone who had grown up in an environment that valued equality, had experienced the harshness of status discrimination. Conrad asked me what we would do if a similar noble became the orphanage director or the high priest, Dirk explained. And that was when I finally understood. For an entire season, the nobles left in the orphanage had refused to change, and that had made Dirk realize something. Few noble-born children would have ever embraced the perspective of the orphans. Woman told us that you and Lady Rosamund are leaving the temple next year. She also mentioned that she's going to be purchased and that Lord Melcourt is becoming the High Bishop. Okay, so she decided she was going. Okay. Indeed, so many important roles were about to change hands. The High Bishop, High Priest, Orphanage Director, and Orphanage Manager. This news had naturally thrown the orphanage into a panic. Even the adults known for their composure had grown frantic, which made Dirk absolutely terrified. I thought about what I could do to help out, but nothing came to mind. The best outcome would be for a good noble who cared about the orphanage to be put in charge, but there aren't many of those to begin with, right? I don't want things to go back to how they were. He turned to his sister, especially because Delia can't leave the orphanage. Delia's love for her brother was so strong that she once committed a crime for him. By all rights, she should have been executed alongside the previous High Bishop, but my intervention had convinced the Ob to simply confine her to the orphanage instead. Her life would change dramatically if something happened in the way things were being managed. For her to live in peace, both the High Bishop and the High Priest need to be good nobles, Dirk concluded. There's no requirement for the High Bishop or the High Priest to be nobles, Hartman noted in a quiet voice. Both positions used to be given to blue priests. There is no need for you to become a noble. Dirk shook his head. That was how it used to be. But our current High Bishop is a member of the Archducal family, and nobles now visit the temple on a regular basis. Things have changed. Only nobles can fight back against nobles. Am I wrong? No, not at all. A blue priest would stand no chance of resisting the will of a noble unless they were a noble themselves. The former attendants who had returned to the orphanage after the purge had made it clear that there existed an impassable barrier between the blue priests and noble society. And now that there were noble children living in the temple as apprentice blue priests, moved there for their parents' crimes, a common blue priest would have no means of defense. I want to protect the methods that Lady Rosemine taught us and protect the orphanage so that Delia and everyone else can live happily. That's why I need to become a noble than the high bishop or high priest. You can be the orphanage director. It wasn't enough to simply want to become a noble. Dirk understood this, and it was why he had given up on ever going down that path. But now, he had a chance. If he could pass the test and challenges before him, he would actually be baptized as a noble. I can't miss this opportunity, Dirk said. Hartman nodded. Indeed, never again can we expect so many noble children to enter the orphanage, or the odd to provide them with magic tools to return to noble society. We had only arrived at our current situation, though, through a string of unlikely events, the Purge, our resolve to save the noble-born children, our decision to replenish our damaged noble population as quickly as possible, and the royal family's agreement to send us magic tools. Most important of all, this had occurred now before Dirk's baptism. In many ways, this really was his only chance. However, Hartman continued, it seems that your sister, whom you care so much about, is opposed to you becoming a noble. He gestured to Delia, who was weeping and shaking her head in protest. Dirk looked very troubled. Please, Dirk, Delia wailed, reconsider. If you get baptized as a noble, I won't be able to see you anymore. I won't be able to call you family. For the rest of our lives, status will require me to treat you only as my superior. I don't care how bad things get here. I'll survive, so please don't leave me. Each word that Delia cried out broke my heart a little more. It was like watching myself sob about not wanting to be taken away from my loved ones. I was well aware just how agonizing it was not to be not just separated from one's family, but also forbidden from ever calling them family in the first place. Dirk, don't do this. Stay by her side. She really loves and cares about you. Having emotional support is more important than you know. In my heart, I was crying out to him as well. I couldn't actually voice my feelings, though. Everyone would assume I was ordering him to stay. On top of that, while it was easy to forget, Hartman was in the midst of carrying out his interviews. I had said time and time again that I would respect the children's choices, so I couldn't just interject. After obtaining Hartman's permission, Dirk went over to Delia and tenderly stroked her crimson hair. She clung to him all the while, begging him not to go. Delia, Dirk said, you're the one who taught me what Lady Rosemine gave us and what she did to change the orphanage, aren't you? You told me how she protected us from high-ranking nobles and the nobles of other places. I'd always been on guard against Delia when she served as my attendant, since she quite openly spied on me for Besenwast. We hadn't been close at all, but according to Dirk, she had only nice things to say about me. There was a fire in Dirk's dark brown, almost black eyes, as though I were his personal hero. Lord Hartman always says the same thing as you when he visits the orphanage, he says. He tells us how amazing Lady Rosemine is, and how hard she's working for our sakes. Excuse me, Hartman, what have you been doing in the orphanage? I swiveled my head to look at him. He was nodding along with an extremely satisfied smile. Lord Hartman said that Lady Rosemine became the Archduke's adopted daughter to protect the people she cared about. I want to be like her. I want to become a noble so I can protect everyone I care about here in the orphanage. Please, Delia, I need you to understand. Delia broke down in tears. She didn't want to be separated from her brother, but she also couldn't hold him back any longer. She was caught between two worlds, and as she desperately tried to figure out what to do, her hold on Dirk loosened. Dirk slipped out of his sister's arms and returned to Hartman, not looking back even as Delia reached out to him. I don't want the changes Lady Rosemine made for the orphanage to be undone, he said, his eyes wavering. Please, Lord Hartman, make me into a noble. Hartman gazed straight back at him. Trying to increase your mana with rejuvenation potions is going to be painful enough, but if you choose to be baptized in the orphanage, even in the future, most people would assume that you are the child of a criminals. Noble society would not look upon or treat you kindly. Dirk would be baptized alongside the children of the former Veronica faction, and Sylvester would become their guardian. The nobles would see them all as the children of criminals, and the others baptized with him would also certainly mock him for being a commoner. Above all else, Hartman continued, Lady Rosemine won't be here to protect you. Half-hearted resolve won't be enough for you to become a noble. As an orphan, I would not have stated my wish without being completely sure. Orange and dark brown eyes clashed. Then, after a pause, Hartman's expression softened into a smile. Very well, I shall consult the Ob and obtain a magic tool for you. Dirk finally relaxed. He crossed his arms and knelt, then went back to his sister, Delia. She looked up and glared at him in complete silence, her blue eyes full of tears. Dirk had been so confident before, but her own faltering stare made him waver. Are you mad? I won't respond, she said. Not to Delia. Call me sister. What? Delia pouted and turned away out of spite, her raised chin the picture of prickliness. From now until you become a noble, I won't respond to you unless you call me sister. This is your punishment for making such an important choice without consulting me, your family first. Geez, you always mimic Lady Rosemine's worst traits. They're her coolest traits. Her coolest traits. You did something major on a whim without even warning anyone. That's definitely one of her worst traits. I have to agree on that one. You charge headlong without consulting anybody. Jeez, Lady Rosamund has always been like this. Wait, what? You think this is my fault? I knew that Dilly was only trying to hide her embarrassment, but I couldn't help feeling exposed. My guard knights were chuckling to themselves as she listed all the things I'd done in the past. While Dirk retorted that my actions had ultimately been for the best. It was a classic argument between siblings. I see you have always made important decisions on a whim, Lady Rosamund. You haven't grown since before your baptism. Oh, no, she hasn't. Oh, no, she has, Hartman said, not even attempting to mask his pride. Her influence has spread immeasurably and now engulfs the entire country. What is it that, if not growth? That isn't helpful in the slightest. While everyone was using the siblings' argument as fodder to embarrass me, Feline quietly spoke up. Lady Rosamund, may I speak with Conrad? I said that she could. Feline walked over to her brother, then their mother's heirloom in hand. Conrad, do you have a moment? Yes, sister. Feline nodded and held out the heirloom. This is the magic tool that Mother left you. Lady Rosamund has agreed to give you the rejuvenation potions I could not prepare on my own. You can be a noble again. Will you be baptized as my little brother? He tilted his head at her. Even if we have rejuvenation potions, how can I be a noble without money? Woman told us that the children who receive the Archduke's magic tools will get to have him as their guardian, but that won't include me, will it? The children baptized with the Archduke's as their guardian wouldn't need to worry about funding their own education. Any money or learning materials they required would be seized from the purged nobles. Conrad wouldn't receive this privilege, though. He hadn't met the Archduke's mana requirements. Conrad continued, you always said it would be really expensive to gather materials needed to attend the Royal Academy. I don't think we'll be able to prepare everything. It would cost so much that we'll need to split the hundreds of sheets of paper we make. Or sell the hundreds of sheets of paper we make. Even he understood that as a minor, Feline would struggle to support him while also supporting herself. Conrad, if you choose to become a noble again, we will return home. There's a chance that Mother's belongings are still there. We could use them to support you at the Royal Academy. Feline had already bought her own learning materials. If she could find some more at home, then Conrad would be able to attend the Royal Academy with her. It would even be possible to use her status as my retainer to wring money from her father. Sister, father doesn't care about me, and it was because Lady Jonsara took my tool away that I wasn't able to become a noble in the first place. I don't want to go back there. You know, this is your last chance to become a noble. The orphanage won't be given any more magic tools, nor will you have Lady Rosamund here to provide you with rejuvenation potions. Plus, life as a noble is much different from life as a Grey Priest, right? Conrad shook his head. Save that magic tool for your own child. Feline furrowed her brow, squeezed her eyes shut, then let out a melancholy sigh. If you choose not to become a noble, then there won't be a future in which we can live as siblings. For us to spend time together, I need to purchase you. Purchase me? But I won't be of any use to you. I would do it as an indulgence, simply so that I could spend time with my little brother, Feline said. Then with a smile, she held up 4 fingers. There are 4 paths ahead of me. The first is to leave you in the orphanage and give my name to Lady Rosamund so I can go with her. The second is to stay in Ehrenfest until my coming of age, then leave you in the orphanage to serve Lady Rosamund. The third is to return home and support you in becoming a noble. And the last one, if you decide not to become a noble, is to stay here in Ehrenfest to be with you. Before I can choose one, I must know your plans for the future. Conrad trailed off, his mouth flapping open and shut as he struggled to decide whether he should voice his true feelings. Feline gave him a troubled smile. If you don't tell me, I'll just follow my own selfish desires. I want to dedicate my life to the orphanage. I don't want to live with you. I want to stay here with all the people who were there for me when I was hurting most. Oh. I see, Feline whispered, slumping her shoulders. Thank you for telling me. And what will you do in the orphanage? I want to become a blue priest like Brother Freetic. As it turned out, Conrad already had a goal to work toward. He wanted to be like a certain blue priest, someone who could earn money on his own and support himself, who had the trust of the High Bishop and the High Priest, and who looked after the temple in their absence. He was valued so highly that even fought to retrieve him when he was taken away during the Purge. Conrad sees Freetic as his role model? I never would have guessed. He continued, Lutz from the planting company said that they need more blue priests who know how the workshop functions. That's what I want to become. Also, I made a promise with Dirk. If he can become a noble, I work to become a blue priest who can support us both. Then we can protect the orphanage together. There was a distinct sparkle in his eyes, which was so much like his sister's. If you don't mind me voicing my selfish desires, I want you to stay in Ehrenfest until you come of age. I want you to help me become a blue priest after my baptism. It wouldn't be as expensive as becoming a noble, but becoming an apprentice blue priest would cost money too. Conrad was a lay noble, and one with that much mana at that. So he wouldn't be able to supply much after his baptism. The duchy offered subsidies based on how much mana the children provided, so he would need help until this time came when he could earn enough to support himself. My mana quantity is so low that even my own father abandoned me, Conrad said. I think that becoming a blue priest and supporting Dirk and Lord Melkor would be much more meaningful than trying to become a noble again. He had set his sights on a life in the temple that wouldn't involve becoming a noble. He wanted to be a blue priest and support himself, not live as one of the Greys who could easily be bought and taken away. Very well, Feline replied with a bright smile. I will stay here in Arenfest until my coming of age to look after you and assist you in protecting the orphanage. It was a relief to see that they had each chosen a path that would make them happy. Now I just needed to help Feline as her lady. This would include laying the groundwork for Elvira to support her and requesting the assistance of the Archducal family as the highest authority in Arenfest to ensure that the nobles visiting the temple wouldn't cause any damage. Where should I start? My mood brightened as I watched the two siblings. Conrad was glad to have both communicated his wish and received his sister's approval. He seemed a lot more open with her than before. Sister, you said that nobles are attending meetings with merchants now, right? I want to know what to discuss and the many ways that Lady Rosamund has participated. Very well, but do you wish to attend such meetings yourself? It was hardly the job of a blue priest to meet with merchants, but Conrad looked so excited that I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Not to mention if he did end up becoming a blue priest who frequented the workshop, there was a genuine chance that the planting company might ask him to attend, so that they consult him on various matters. The planting company merchants who visit the workshop have been teaching me about business bit by bit, Conrad explained. Then with his fist clenched, he declared, I want to be a cutthroat merchant, negotiator with the soul of a merchant, just like Lady Rosamund. Conrad, isn't that a pretty messed up gold math? A blue priest capable of negotiating on Lady Rosamund's level. Feline glanced over at me, then giggled. You're going to have a long and very difficult road ahead of you, Conrad. You certainly were composed when you faced your brother, I remarked to Feline, in contrast to how confused and distraught she had seemed when consulting me. She had come across as calm and collected during her earlier discussion with Conrad. She had doubtless been fighting against a storm of emotions raging in her heart, but she hadn't let that show. A blush reddened Feline's cheeks as she replied, Daniel scolded me. Oh? I was already having such a hard time figuring out what I wanted to do next year. So when this chance rose for Conrad to become a noble again, I kept forward without thinking things through. Or leap forward. Yeah, you're rubbing off on them. Before Riarda and the others will work through these things with me, but she and Brunhilde are gone now, and my situation with my brother isn't something to be discussed with those at the castle. Most nobles would simply declare that Conrad wasn't her brother anymore, now that he moved to the orphanage, and that there was no need for her to give him any more thought. That kind of attitude wouldn't have led to a fruitful discussion. I thought you were the only one I could rely on, Feline continued, but Daniel scolded me for that. He said that your responsibility for Conrad ended the moment he entered the orphanage, and that I should not trouble you with this matter. Everyone had scolded me for getting too involved with Feline after I went to her house to rescue Conrad. With that in mind, Daniel had explained that it was unreasonable to expect even more of me. You are busy enough preparing for your move. Whether I would choose to make Conrad a noble or bring him with me to the sovereignty was for me to figure out. I am well aware that as my lady, you will always be considerate of my choices and my future, and to think things over for me and consult it, but I must not be so quick to depend on you. You are not Conrad's guardian as you are mine, and I should not request even more help with an orphan. Daniel had walked Feline through her options and the support she could hope to receive. But first and foremost, he had said she should ask Conrad what he wanted to do. Holy cow, what? Since when did Daniel get so cool? He told me if my heart was set on making Conrad a noble, he would propose to me and support me as my fiancé. What? He proposed to you? It was more of an offer to help me than a formal proposal, a way of expanding my options. He smiled shyly and continued, but I thought that relying on Daniel would be even more unacceptable than relying on you. He always helps me when I need it most, but the time has come for me to graduate from being a pitiable girl who must always be protected. If I am to walk beside him, I would rather do it with my head held high. Thus, I chose the path that will not force him to offer more assistance than is reasonable. Daniel certainly hadn't featured in any of the paths that Feline had mentioned to Conrad. However, wouldn't that make Daniel assume she was rejecting him? Once I am an independent woman, I will propose using the method that Clarissa told me about. Oh, no! Not the forceful one! No! Clarissa, you idiot! Feline declared. I glanced across the room at Daniel, who was facing away from us. Should I warn him of what's to come? I really hope you like knives, Daniel. Oh, dear. Poor Daniel. He's going to have a very forceful proposal. I'll get to work on everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one.